Hello, everyone, and welcome to this last event online for this season. It's a great pleasure to have a special guest, Dr. Barbara Gorgoni, from the oh goodness,
I can say.
Yes, please, yes, go ahead. With the special engagement team with research, am I correct?
Public engagement with research.
Senior moment. Apologies for that, my senior moment. So it's a pleasure to have Barbara here tonight. Barbara is a graduate from the University of Rome in Italy. She got her undergraduate degree there in biological sciences. And then she went on to do a PhD in life sciences at the University of Dundee. Then she had postdoctoral posts at the University of Edinburgh and the University of Aberdeen, where she took an interest in public engagement with research. And she also became a STEM ambassador. So it is since 2015, I understand, that she became part of the public engagement with research unit. And we are looking forward to discussing with her about her personal experience about women in STEM and women in more generally in the sciences. Welcome, Barbara. Welcome to our conversation.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So I don't know if you know how we normally operate, but we take it in turns with my colleague David to ask questions to our guests. So I pass on to my colleague David, who is going to start with the first question.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Barbara, you're part of the public engagement with the research team of Aberdeen University. What does that actually mean? What do you do in your role? And I noticed that in the introduction there, Sandra used an acronym STEM. What's STEM? Can you just explain that for us as well?
Okay, so I'll start with the easy one, STEM. STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, and is an acronym that's used to indicate, the wider science careers. Maybe sometimes you also hear about STEAM. I don't know if that happens, but in our new world of interdisciplinarity and collaboration, we include the arts as well. So STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics. About public engagement with research, for short, we call it PERU at the University of Aberdeen. So my role is to support researchers and help them to communicate the science and the research they do with audiences outside academia. So the general public, we call it, and can be anything from anybody from, young children and school pupils, adults, community groups, patient groups, and so on. But in practice, like I like to say, that I can do anything from, making coffee to submit large grant applications, because the role includes organizing events where researchers take part, and I'm going to talk about a few of these events tonight. Provide training and advice on activities that they want to do, review and comment on their research proposals. Research proposals these days have a section on societal impact, what the impact the research is going to have and how you're going to achieve this, and public engagement is part of that. So we help with that. And we also submit applications to get funding to run our own events. For example, European Researchers' Night, it's a large application that we do to the European Union. We're still allowed to do that for the time being. Well, yeah, so a bit of everything, very, very varied days. I talk to a lot of people, both researchers and outside organizations. I also put in touch researchers with outside organizations such as the Council, the Art Gallery, the Science Center, things like that. So,
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. So you're Italian and you completed your undergraduate degree in Rome, but You have done your doctoral and postdoctoral studies here in Scotland. So can you tell us a bit more about why you moved to Scotland and how studying here shaped your career?
Yeah, so I think as most things in life, they're just coincidences sometimes. So after I did my degree, which was, well, we say in Italian biological sciences, but if you kind of compare it with degrees here, it's more biomedical sciences and biochemistry. So I was working in a lab, and I waiting to decide what I wanted to do. I took a maternity cover post. So just a short-term 6 months maternity cover, so I could start getting paid a little bit. And the head of the lab was a woman, Valeria Poli from Turin. She got offered a position as a director of a section of a department in Dundee. So Dundee, at the time, we're speaking late 1990s, saw a huge boom in funding for medical sciences and biomedical sciences. And so they opened this brand new fancy building funded by the Wellcome Trust, one of the main funders in the UK. And so brand new, lots of lab spaces. And she accepted and decided to move her lab. And so I happened to be there, and she asked if I wanted to do a PhD. And so kind of cheating a little bit, because I came to Dundee, but I was in an Italian-led lab. But my colleagues were all, I mean, obviously she recruited from all over the world. So that's how I arrived in Dundee. I had a great time. It was a big culture shock. I was in Rome, and Dundee in the 90s is not like the Dundee of today. I kind of saw it change through the years. I remember when we couldn't get any dinner after 7 p.m. But great experience. And then, so doing science in the UK in general was very different than doing science in Italy, because there was a lot more funding here. Percentage of GDP was completely different from what was in Italy. In Italy, people really struggle. And so kind of the decision to stay here and pursue science was kind of taken because, you know, lots of opportunities. And at the same time, though, I met the person who's now my husband and who's from Aberdeen. And so having kind of my personal life sorted made the decision easier. So I decided to stay. And I think, it was the right decision, I think. I would say that it was a big advantage being able to come here and do science here, because, as I said, more funding, but also more recognition. For example, in Italy, we have this theme that we always talk about. We call it precariato, which basically means unstable contracts. So researchers are on short-term contracts. But the thing is, here is the same. I never had a permanent contract as a researcher. It was always short-term contracts, 3 years. But the difference was that I had all the employment benefits of the other, the permanent post holders. And so I could, also sort out my personal life as well as my science careers. I could get a mortgage. In Italy, it's very difficult to get a mortgage, for example, maternity benefits and all that. So
it was a different working environment altogether, of course.
Yeah.
Any challenge with the language, just an extra little thing?
Oh, I thought I knew English. I arrived very confident, thought I can speak English very well. And then I arrived in Dundee and I couldn't understand a word and nobody. So yeah, the language, the culture as well was very different, of course. But I adapted quite quickly. And then once you know a local person, then everything gets easier. But yeah, of course, there's things that, I miss from Italy, and now it's difficult to reconcile, and that's the way it is.
Thank you.
So your background is in biological sciences. How difficult is it, Barbara, for women to forge a career in the sciences and in engineering and mathematics?
Yeah. So it is still difficult. I mean, there's huge progress being made, but if we look at the statistics of women, for example, women, the percentage of female graduates in STEM, so that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is only 26%. And if we look specifically at engineering and computing science, that goes down to 16%. So percentages are still very low. If we then look at the amount of the percentages of management roles that women hold in STEM, that's 14%. So they go from 26 to 14. And there's many different reasons for this, I think. And one of them is environment. It's difficult to pinpoint what exactly makes somebody, choose a career or make a decision, but I think environment is key. For example, for me, I was toying with the idea of doing a science or maybe biology when I was younger, but what actually did it for me was reading the biography of Rita Levi-Montalcini. And I don't know if you know her. She died not too long ago at the grand old age of 104, I think. So she was an Italian scientist that started her career in the 1930s, and she came from a Jewish family. So I think shortly after she graduated, the racial laws came into effect in Italy. She was kicked out of university and she started a lab in her kitchen. So with pots and things, and she got a Nobel Prize in the 80s for her work on nerve growth. And the experiment, she then moved to the United States, and obviously had an amazing career there. But the experiment started in her bedroom, basically. And I thought that was amazing. When I was reading this, when I was 16, I thought, obviously she was a woman, Jewish, huge discrimination, and she overcame all this, and it really inspired me. So people need to be inspired and identify. And so the issue is that we don't have enough role models, female role models, because obviously there's a lot of female scientists, but if I ask people to think about scientists right away, I don't want to make assumptions, but chances are, that they think of Einstein or Darwin, or I think still the majority of people, when they think about the discovery of DNA, for example, think about Watson and Crick, but there was a woman involved in that discovery that was never recognized. And there's women in the past and also contemporary women. And I think there's been great progress. And I think social media has helped a lot with this. For example, I don't know if you remember, I need to remember her name. What's her name again? Katie Bowman. A few years ago, when there was the first picture of a black hole, and that actually on social media, that went viral because it was this woman, quite young, I should say, I think in her 30s, that did all the algorithms and mathematical equations to actually manage to do that. And so, so I think environment is key, and we need a lot more role models. And also we need to build confidence, because we keep, we hear that the STEM, well, I think in general, the workplace is a very competitive environment. But then, there's been research done on how boys and girls learn in school as well. And boys are very competitive, and they respond better when you give them challenges against each other, whereas girls are a lot more collaborative and they enjoy the problem solving and the team working. So when you throw them in, a competitive environment, they kind of naturally tend to back down a bit. And so that type of research as well is important, how to engage and how to teach things like that. So yeah, I think good progress, but I think still quite a long way to go. And there's lots of initiatives. For example, the STEM Ambassador scheme, of which I'm part of. So this is a UK-wide network of people who work in STEM disciplines, and it's, you know, from university, from industry, from all sorts of organizations that give up their time to engage with school children. And there's like a specific training course called People Like Me, where they particularly ask for female STEM ambassadors to go and speak to schoolgirls, because when you see somebody like you, then you're more encouraged, obviously, to start that, you know, to try it out. And this is true also for ethnic minorities. I mean, obviously, it's not only about the gender issue, but ethnic minorities the same. And also, sorry, can I make, sorry, I could speak forever, but I just wanted to make another point about intersectionality as well, because we have ethnic minorities and we have people coming from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and these people obviously are discriminated and they're challenged, but within these groups, women are more challenged and discriminated than men, because they're the more, you know, it's always the most vulnerable group, obviously, that suffers than the issues. And for example, you know, it's in these different groups, but also it's in times of crisis. And if you see the COVID pandemic as a time of crisis, it's been shown that female academics published a lot less than their male colleagues, because during COVID, why? Obviously homeschooling, the families were at home, and so the women, you know, bore the brunt of the situation. And yeah, so there's lots of different reasons and things to keep in mind, and lots of different aspects to tackle to solve it, I think.
Of course. So this is, of course, in general, but in personal terms for you, what are the satisfactions and challenges in trying to inspire this future generation of scientists?
So I think the main challenge is to try and communicate what science is, or also more in general what research is, because there's the idea, I think, especially in young people, and the misconception that science is just facts, a collection of facts, and that's what we're doing, we're going and we're learning facts. But actually, science is not that. Science is a process and it's a way of thinking. And so the fascinating part of science is actually doing it rather than sit back and learning it. And yeah, it requires a little bit more effort maybe. So that's kind of challenging when you're engaging and trying to communicate the passion, right? The passion I have for science is, yeah, it's not just about learning from a textbook, because that's not what science is. But once they get it, once, you know, you're speaking to a group of young people, for example, and, you know, we have a few projects I want to talk about. It's amazing, because then they run with it and they apply, because it's a process applicable to anything. So it's not really important what you're researching, really, but it's the love and the passion of researching and the process, and then getting that result, or how you generate, you know, the new knowledge. And yeah, no, that's really great. And we have projects where it's exactly that, where the young people, for example, they do the science and the research themselves. And that's great when they turn around and teach somebody else what, you know, they've learned in the process.
Of course. I think, just going a little bit further with this, my experience with science as a child is that we didn't have all those opportunities to really put into practice the theory. Whereas nowadays, I think that's one of the main assets of the modern school, that, you know, being
yes,
able to, yes, to put the theory into practice and the application of science.
Yes, and we try to complement, what the schools do as well and help them out in that.
Of course. Now, before David starts the next question, I think that Barbara wants to share, am I correct, her screen and show some images.
So, okay. Is that full screen now?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that looks good, Barbara. So you've been part of the organisation of various community cafes, and these are names that some of the audience might have heard or might have been familiar with, as Cafe Scientific and Cafe Med. Can you tell us a bit more about what they are, what they're designed to do, and what response you get from the members of the public? And does the response vary according to the age groups?
Yes. Okay. So right. So the first cafe that we ran, and also because it's a kind of a franchise, is the Cafe Scientific, because that runs in loads of different cities and places around the world now. I know there's one in Rome as well. And so the concept is that a researcher comes and to talk about their topic, but the talk is very short. It's usually 20 minutes, and it's very informal. So we don't allow PowerPoint presentations, for example. So they can maybe have some props or some photos or images to share, but no presentation. So they're just themselves and the audience. Very informal, as you can see. It's the latest version that we ran before COVID was in the Kino Bar in the basement of the Belmont Film House. And but the majority of the time then it's given to the audience to ask questions. So they give a little introduction, and then it's Q&A with the audience the majority of the time, and it's very informal. People are drinking coffee or beer and chatting about it. And very similar to that, in Aberdeen, we introduced the Cafe Med, which is a very similar format. The difference is that it's a researcher and a clinician, and they talk about a specific condition or medical challenge, and you get the two perspectives. The researcher the clinician that usually talks about the problem and the need for a solution, and then the researcher talks about what they're doing about it. And the Cafe Med that you see here was usually held in the cafe of the Sati Center in Forester Hill. No alcohol, but teas and coffees. And so the type of audience can be quite varied. So as you were asking the question, David, I noticed that this audience of Cafe Med is kind of maybe older adults, whereas the previous one, and I can't remember what the topic was in the first picture, younger. But yeah, it depends on the topic. It also depends on the night sometimes, or the time of year. These were all obviously stopped during COVID. We've run them for years. 10, 12, 15 years even. And actually, the day the university closed for COVID, we were meant to have a Cafe Med, and I stood outside the Sati Center in case somebody turned up. Nobody turned up because, everybody was already kind of staying at home. But during COVID, we started another cafe online, which was its collection of podcasts that we call Cafe Connect. And in this podcast, we interview researchers, again, about half an hour. And unfortunately, there's no Q&A. We try and engage on social media, asking people for questions and comments, but we've never really managed to get anything back from that. So yeah, podcasts are a great tool, and they have their place. But I think what a community cafe does is it's different, and we're missing it. we're hoping to get back to it soon.
Of course, of course. I know, Barbara, that you're also involved, you also work with an Aberdeen-based charity, which is called SHMU, SHMU, which stands for Station House Media Unit, and we can see something about this in this slide. And they are involved in regeneration projects in video, radio, and music production, digital inclusion, as well as traditional and online publications. So can you explain how the University of Aberdeen is involved with this charity and how this collaboration benefits the community?
Yeah, so we work mainly with their youth media group. So SHMU is a large charity that has lots of different projects and is, I think, most known for its community radio, SHMU FM, but they have this youth media group where they have young people between 11 and 17-year-olds from all the regeneration areas of Aberdeen to get trained in media skills. And so the way the university works with them, it's interesting because it's kind of a paradigm, I think, of how a relationship with a community organization really should evolve and change. Because the first contact we had with them was a colleague of mine. We wanted to have a radio program with their community radio station. So we just asked if they could host us for an afternoon, a weekly afternoon program called Talking Science, where we were talking about science and interviewing scientists from the university. But then the relationship evolved, and they invited us to do some hands-on demonstration at their galas. So they have these summer galas, mostly in Tillydron, I think, and Seaton as well. And so we were doing there, and the youth group kind of got interested in what we were doing. And then we applied for funding, and we got funding from BBC Children in Need through Wellcome Trust. So Wellcome Trust, which is a large charity that funds a huge amount of biomedical research, they collaborate with BBC Children in Need so that they could fund projects for young people linked to science. And so we got this funding that was for 1 year to produce media, such as videos or radio programs, that the young people produce them using science stories, so put them in touch with researchers. And that was very successful. And here on the right, you can see somebody dressed in costume. That's James Lind, who was the first person to conduct a clinical trial on the ships for scurvy. So, and he was the first person to basically divide a ship crew into and give citrus fruit to one half and nothing to the other, and discovered that it was lack of vitamin C that caused it. And so this researcher dressed up as James Lind and was out and about in one of our events, talking about clinical trials, randomization, how people are divided in clinical trials. And then you see then these young people here interviewing him, and they made a video about him, and then that was released. So in another picture here, we invited them in a lab where they extracted DNA from their own saliva, and then they could see it, and obviously discussing different genetic components. And that was very successful. And at the moment, then we applied for phase 2 of the same project, BBC Children in Need, for a 3-year project. And unfortunately, we started just before COVID hit. And so we've been a bit slower than what we were hoping, because everything went online. But for example, at the top, we have a researcher there, Beatrice Gulau, talking about the numerical aspect of clinical trials and how statistics is important. And they produced a podcast as well with Beatrice, talking about what percentages mean when we say I think they were talking about bacon. Eating bacon gives you a higher percentage of getting bowel cancer, for example. But what does that percentage mean? And is it really increasing risk? And looking at all these aspects, which is it's great. And I was saying earlier, right, that the reason I don't have any pictures, I didn't have any pictures because it was quite recent that they did a session on the use of artificial intelligence for clinical diagnostics and for imaging, for example. So researchers are looking at artificial intelligence to look at fractures, for example. So because you have the radiologists that have to look at loads of x-rays, and not very efficient, artificial intelligence could come in. So anyway, they learned about this, and then they actually presented an activity at the Science Center. So it was the young people that were talking to families and children at the Science Center about this. So it's a very long-term collaboration, and we work very well together. And because during the years, obviously, and kind of stepping up a little bit at a time, you build trust. And
excellent. Thank you.
So Barbara, I'm aware that you're involved with secondary schools, with projects there. How do you go about engaging with children of that age and exciting them about science? And going back to the discussion that we had about women in STEM, do you see a difference with younger girls? Are they more open or more accessible than the older generations?
Okay, so to answer the first part of your question, how do we engage young, children? Primary school children are relatively easy in comparison because you need to have hands-on activities, colored stuff, explosive stuff, things. Older children, teenagers, for example, it's a bit more difficult because we're really competing with the amount of stimulation they get from everywhere. And of course, I don't want to demonize the internet or social media at all, because I think they have huge advantages, and they've really there've been big improvements in our quality of life, but we are competing with this sort of things. When I read Rita Levi-Montalcini's autobiography, I was stuck in a trip in the car with my parents, and I only brought with me like 3 books, and that was it. And when the books were finished, I started again. There were no Kindles and things, so that's it. But I think the way to engage and what is really effective is to find a common ground. So the overlap between what interests them and what I, for example, think that it's important. And also, obviously, the doing rather than listening to us. So one project that we have at the moment with secondary schools is about food systems and the impact that climate change has on the food that we eat, and also the impact that the food that we eat has on climate change. And of course, this is very topical, but the way that we go in with when we're working with secondary pupils from S1 and S2 is basically to just ask about the food, right? So they know what they're eating, or they can go and find out. So the first step was for them to go and find out what they're eating, and then find out where the food comes from. And then that kind of evolved. And at the moment, they're looking at what food can we grow in Scotland, and that, or can we produce locally so that we're not too dependent on foods coming from abroad, because obviously as soon as there's a crisis, and there's climate change, of course, but also, the fuel increases, Brexit, lots of challenges that obviously,
Had an impact.
have an impact on everything. And yeah, so I think the key really to engage and make them passionate about this is to hook them on something that interests them. And we've used video games, for example, as well. But our video games were not fancy enough to to compete with the huge market ones. But still, you know, they were good. Had a video game that we produced a few years ago called Fungal Invaders. You know, I don't know if any of you, I was never a gamer, so I didn't know, but there's a video game from the 80s, you know, vintage, called Space Invaders. And so it was the same. We had the fungi which infect our bodies. Yeah, so. And about whether there's a difference between boys and girls, I would say at primary school level, no. I think we have, they're just as open and curious as boys. In older, for example, in SHMU, I can see there are girls, but there's more boys, and they speak up more. And I think, again, that goes back to the confidence issue. And confidence, I mean, I was actually reading a while back what confidence is. And confidence basically is about providing the tools to people to do things. It's not just saying, you're great, you'll be fine, on you go. It's about giving them, you know, the tools and teaching them how to actually put things into practice. And I think that's a challenge as well, is a lack of, yeah, confidence. Boys tend to speak up more at an older age. Yeah, so.
This is very interesting. Well, we were just talking before we started that last week was British Science Week. So what event was your favorite? Can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, so British Science Week is, again, a UK-wide initiative, and it's about 10 days in March. And so this year, first time, you know, we decided to do everything in person, but we decided to keep it small because we didn't know how people would react to in-person events. And so we had a few events here. There's a day at Aberdeen Science Centre. So we have a very close collaboration with Aberdeen Science Centre, because actually one of the main points is, once you decide to engage with a group, you also need to find the easiest way to do it. And if we want to engage with families and young children, right, why reinvent the wheel when you can go to a science center and they're amazing? And I don't know if you've been to the new one. It's been recently refurbished. And if you remember the old Satrosphere,
yes.
It's a different world and a different place. So it's, yes, it's really good. And also it has a lot of exhibits for older children as well, for teenagers and for grown-ups as well. Really lots of interesting stuff. So we ran this Discovery Day, was on Saturday, and we had researchers from different areas having hands-on activities interspaced with the permanent exhibit of the Science Center. So on the right, I don't know if you can see, but there's the lady leaning towards that something that's pig's lungs, and the real lungs. They were pickled, like they say, so preserved. And there's a pump there, and they were showing how air inflates the lungs and things. At the bottom, we had the Eat Well plate. So the Eat Well plate is, you might know, you know, what's the content, nutritional content of the food that we eat, and what should we eat more of? Obviously, vegetables more than, but also proteins and the complex carbohydrates and all that. But they did quite an interesting thing. They put in parallel what's an Eat Well plate that's healthy for a person compared to the Eat Well plate healthy for the environment. And so and then if we can find, you know, some, you know, the overlap between, because for us, maybe beef, lean beef is healthy, but you know, for the environment, not so much. So quite interesting. And at the top, we're doing experiments with carbon dioxide release and lava lamps. But my favorite event really is what we call Bright Club. And Bright Club is stand-up comedy performed by researchers. And here we were at the Aberdeen Breakneck Comedy Club. And so we had a group of 5 volunteer researchers that, yeah, stood up and talked about the research in some cases, their life as a researcher, and they were really funny. And for example, this researcher, Anna, she's from Mallorca, and she actually studies bird migration. So she was talking about how the best way to study migration is to be a migrant yourself. And she moved to, you know, Aberdeen, and it's quite funny. And the reason I really like this is that it doesn't feel like learning, because that's the other thing. I should have maybe mentioned a point that I forgot to make, is that with young people, the best way to engage is that it doesn't feel like learning, it doesn't feel like school. And that's a thing that we do with SHMU Youth Media Group. We're not linked to the curriculum on any of the activities that we do with them, because it's not learning and it's not school. And here for, you know, the obviously this is our over 18 audience, is in a bar, and it doesn't feel like learning, but between jokes, obviously they are talking about the research and yeah, different aspects. So, and you have a laugh as well. So.
Excellent.
Well, we've seen clearly your team's involved in many different activities, and with a wide range of ages and backgrounds. You know, we've mentioned the Community Cafe and British Science Week, but what about the future? What's coming up? Are there other events that you're going to be getting involved in?
Yeah, so the next event that's coming up, and I show this picture, although it's a new event called the Festival of New Ideas. And I don't know if you were familiar with the May Festival that the university did the last weekend of May. Post-pandemic, we decided that instead of having one big festival, we're going to do a series of mini festivals throughout the year. And so we'll call them Universal. And there was one done a few weeks ago called Dark Nights, and was focusing on film. So the Festival of New Ideas will happen in May, last weekend of May, and it's focused on research. So again, so that's my involvement. I'm not really involved in the others. Because we're showcasing university research, and it's going to be on campus. And this image is of an event that we did in May Festival a few years ago. And actually, this event in particular is called Soapbox Science, and is targeted specifically at female scientists talking. So it's just female scientists, because it's part of, you know, that range of initiatives that we're doing, you know, to increase the visibility of women in STEM. But I show this picture because it's going to be on campus. It's going to be a beautiful day. We're hoping, and we're planning the program at the moment, but there's going to be a little bit for everyone. So there's going to be science, but it's also going to be some community theater, music, and so on. So different types of events. See, I don't have many pictures of me, because I'm the one usually in the background taking the pictures, and I don't do any of the public. But I found this picture of Explorathon, which we do at the end of September, and we had made some science ads, only female scientists again. And so I found my Rita Levi-Montalcini to pose with. So Explorathon is part of European Researchers' Night, and that's at the end of September. And the aim of that is to take research and researchers to unexpected places. So we actually, you can't see really in this photo, the one on the right, the one with me, is in St. Nicholas Square. Yeah, St. Nicholas, opposite Marks and Spencer. So
Mhm.
we got stalls there, and we also been to shopping centers and just talk about research. And I think I have another one there. Yeah, so so we also, it's not just science, but we collaborated with Confucius Institute, and they were doing some calligraphy classes. But we also kind of asked people, so because engagement is not, you know, communication only and teaching only, and we, you know, in these situations we also ask what people think, and we were asking, which topics do you think universities should research, or also what would you like to learn more about? And so people were putting their post-its there. And we apply every year for funding from the European Union, and we get it, and it's great because this is a consortium that the University of Aberdeen leads, and yes, and we got it this year as well, so we're going to do it at the end of September. This is the Festival of Social Science, so this is funded by the Economic and Social Science Research Council, and here we did a tour using oh, I forgot the name, the app where you have to find, oh, I forgot the name, I'm so sorry.
No, no, don't worry.
Yeah, anyway, it was great because it's an app, it's a game that a lot of young people do, that they go around and they have to find, it's a game, it'll come to me, but it was great because we had grandparents and you know, with their younger grandchildren together doing it and learning how to use the app. So
of course.
And yeah, so we've got a few things coming up, and we try and advertise them as widely as possible on the newspapers usually. And if you're interested in any of our events, the best way is to join, yeah, the university mailing list.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for this. So just as a conclusion, I have a question, but actually they are two separate questions actually. So I just wanted to know, what is your thought about young students? So do you think there are sufficient enough opportunities to forge a career in STEM nowadays?
Yes, I think so, absolutely. So I was going to talk a little bit about, you know, what I know that we're doing in our university, but we have been, we have some real challenging global issues that, yes, are really, you know, threatening our own existence. And of course, there's climate change on one side, that's obvious, but there's also antimicrobial resistance, for example. We're running out of antibiotics. There's huge inequalities, and all these big challenges are really complex, and they require complex solutions. They don't come from one area of knowledge or expertise. They require people with different types of expertise to come together, and academics from different disciplines, but also experts from industry, farmers for climate change, for example, different businesses. And so in any of the, even in inequality, you don't think maybe it's a scientific issue, it is, right? So because the challenges of, you know, solving inequalities require science and technology and engineering. Maths can be applied to anything. And so I think the opportunities really lie in this multidisciplinary world, research world that we're trying to build, where, you know, there's a need for voices coming from different parts of different organizations, but different parts of society. And so, yes, absolutely, there's always a huge need for STEM graduates and experts. And, you know, you don't need to be an academic to be a STEM worker. The council has loads of STEM workers, you know, any organization really. So yes, and we need to open, you know, get more people and more women, because the more diverse, and more women, more ethnic minority groups, because the more diverse the people are, the more diverse the solutions and the suggestions for solutions can be.
Of course, absolutely right. And we are moving to the last image and the last question. Of course, you work for the University of Aberdeen, so I'm curious to know how the university research plans are adapting to the new challenges of our global communities and the big themes that we are all concerned about, like global warming, like climate change, renewable energy.
So the university, I think, has done a great job in recent years to acknowledge this need for interdisciplinarity. So they've started this, what they call the IDR, so interdisciplinary research centers, and they've identified 5 major challenges that require interdisciplinary solutions. And so we have health, nutrition, and well-being. We have biodiversity, artificial intelligence, social inclusion. Can't remember if I said them all now. Anyway, and so rather than having everyone siloed in their own department, because traditionally universities are divided in departments, or more recently they call them academic schools, and everybody works next to people that do similar work. Whereas with the creation of this interdisciplinary research centers, the idea is to bring different expertise together so that the big challenges can be tackled. And I mean, just giving a couple of examples really of, for example, on the top we have projects a project that is looking at increasing the variety of crops that we grow in Scotland, sustainable crops, and one of them is hemp. And so hemp is quite nutritious, it's high in protein. And so there's a team at the Rowett who's working with local farmers to grow hemp and push hemp as well as a nutrition, a staple food, hopefully. And actually, we'll have an event at the Festival of New Ideas at the end of May where people can go and try hemp pancakes. I'm told they're good. Sorry?
It's wonderful. That's nice.
And sorry. Oh,
no. That's fine. I was just reading. A member of our audience was asking a question, and he's asking if you have any connection, anything in joint venture with Robert Gordon University.
Yeah. So yes. So for example, for Explorathon, where it's kind of a consortium across Scotland, and we always invite researchers from RGU to take part. At the Festival of Social Science, we had a nutritionist from RGU doing an event in collaboration with a nutritionist from the Rowett at the University of Aberdeen. I think traditionally there was a bit of a little bit of a divide between the two universities, but collaboration, I think everybody now recognizes the importance of collaboration. So absolutely, we try and do joint events. I think happy to take questions now. I think I've talked for a long time.
Thank you, Barbara. Maybe if you want to stop sharing the screen so that we can see also our audience, and we can see if anyone has please feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to ask a question to Barbara. You are absolutely welcome to do so, or if you are a bit shy, you can write it in the chat below. Anyone wanted to contribute? I know that
I would like to ask a question. Sandra.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize that I was head of life sciences actually, at Robert Gordon University for 10 years. And that was until 10 years ago. And we did a lot of work on women into science and technology. And in fact, in our department, which had a lot of different aspects of science, we had more female students than males. So Robert Gordon science department was hugely successful in that regard. I want to know from the speaker that was my question actually, about the liaison, the current liaison with Robert Gordon University. Has that fallen away? Are the number of female students there decreasing, or has that been sustained? And I find it disappointing to hear that the numbers seem to be falling as regards women in Aberdeen going into science and technology.
Right. So actually, no, my statistics were UK-wide. They weren't referring to any, Aberdeen or Aberdeen University in general. Those statistics are from WISE, so Women in STEM, and they're UK-wide. I don't know the answer to your, I mean, you're asking if Robert Gordon is still similar numbers. I'm afraid that we don't have that close of, I don't have that close of a relationship with Robert Gordon's. I can say that depending which science, of course, I mean, engineering and computing science type things, you get fewer women. But the biological sciences or the physical sciences, you get more women at graduate level. But even early career researchers, I would say there's still a lot, especially in biology and biomedical sciences. There's a lot of them. The big drop off starts, you can see it as they progress in their career. And then because in the top jobs, in the management, the professorships, there's a lot fewer women than obviously the base that started from. So I think we're doing huge progress in getting girls and young women into science, but then at the end, they still don't progress as they should. And that's a complex issue.
Yeah, I'm disappointed by that, because when I left that department, there were 3 female professors and I was head of school. So the women were well represented in science then, and it seems to me perhaps this was unusual or it's falling off. I don't know.
I can't comment on RGU though, I'm sorry.
I'm disappointed because I thought the two were working better together than they used to. You're quite right. About 25 years ago, perhaps, there was a sort of, well, you can't see me. My video's off.
We can, yes, we can see you now, yes.
Yeah, 25 years ago, there perhaps was some sort of non-liaison, but we worked hard to build up a liaison. And it seems to me that this seems to have fallen away, perhaps?
Not necessarily. I mean, the fact that I'm not involved with, I know some researchers are RGU. I've honestly not asked the question, so I'm not sure what the percentage of female scientists are anymore.
Okay.
So, but yeah, there's still collaboration and interaction. But I don't know. The figures.
It's quite small city. I think it's important to show that there is collaboration and working together there. It's not just about getting them in. There's also the Aberdeen, it's now called Banff-and-Buchan College, right, where there's a science department. So I think it's not just getting them into Aberdeen University, it's getting them into further and higher education.
Absolutely.
You're taking that on board, are you?
Yeah, so actually, I'm not mentioned. So many things I've not mentioned, but one of them is that we have an association called Science Aberdeen. So the British Science Association is a UK-wide organization, and they were organized in branches, and we had a branch in Aberdeen, but then they've disbanded the branches, so we reformed, and we're called Science Aberdeen, and we have representatives from RGU, from the Northeast College, which is called now, Aberdeen University, the Science Centre, and TechFest. TechFest is the other organization that does loads of things about STEM and women in science as well. So we do get together. Well, we started just before the pandemic, and again, we've not been able to do many activities. But yeah, the idea is to create this collaboration across the city. And yeah, and to,
Well, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Is there anyone else who want to comment or ask something?
I've got another question, if
Yes.
I can, Sandra. I noticed that earlier on, Sandra used the B word. She talked about Brexit. So subsequent to that, Barbara, you mentioned that you were getting funding from the European Union. So how has Brexit impacted research? Have you seen a difference?
Right. So on paper, not, because the UK joined as an associate member the Horizon Europe, which is, you know, the agency that distributes research funding throughout the European Union, and the UK should be an associate. And as part of Horizon Europe, we applied for Explorathon, I mentioned, which is European Researchers' Night in Scotland. And we applied, you know, after Brexit, we applied this year and we got the funding. But it seems that there's an issue now with the actual paperwork. So I'm not really big on this because it's my colleagues that deal with all the issues of, you know, the agreements, the legal agreements and everything. But it looks like actually the European Union is not going to provide the funding, at least for this year, because the UK has not officially joined. And I think with what's happening as well in Ukraine, it's not really on anybody's priority.
Yes.
And so UKRI, which is the UK Research and Innovation organization that funds research in the UK, you know, from biomedical to arts and humanities, they have underwritten all the grants that, you know, the European Union funded. So they apparently are going to, give us the funding. But yeah, it's I mean, obviously we were all worried, but then it looked that we were going to be okay, but now we're worried again. So it's work in progress.
I suppose.
Yeah, it's complex, and we have seen that, you know, European universities, they don't ask for collaborations as much as before Brexit, because there's always this question mark whether we're going to be allowed to take part or not.
Of course, of course. Well, this is very interesting. Thank you, Barbara. Well, I suppose that unless anyone else wants to ask something or contribute, perhaps we can just say thank you to Barbara Gorgoni for patiently talking to us tonight and discussing all these very interesting aspects of working in public engagement with research. I just wanted to say a couple of things before I say goodbye. This is our last online event for this season, and I just wanted to thank everyone for patiently following us in these past months. It has been a pleasure to be with you. We are going to have our AGM on Friday, 29th of April, in person at the Rubislaw Church Center. So if you are a member, please join us then. If you're not a member, but you want to become one, please join us then, and so that you can find more about it. And then we are going to have an Italian-style lunch at Aberdeen College on Friday, 6th of May at noon. So continue to follow us and keep your eyes peeled. Look at our website, aberdeenitaliancircle.org. If you are a member, of course, you will receive our notifications, but otherwise, please continue to look at our website and Facebook pages for updates. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Barbara, and good night.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks. Bye.